Hello, my name is Joshua. Welcome to another Python tutorial video. If you have not seen my previous videos, you can check them out here or the link in the description. In the previous videos, we introduced ourselves to basic elements in Python, and we're going to continue with that by doing more of such basic elements. Today, we're going to talk about assigning inputs. We're going to also talk about iterables. We're going to talk about good and bad names, variable names in Python, and also introduce ourselves to functions. Let's get right into it. So from the last videos, we talked about the printing function, which is like we can say hello world print, and this I have to start Python first. Okay, and let me just say hello this time, and this kind of prints out the message into the terminal. What if I want to receive a variable from the user? So in this case, like we said in the last time, we can print the value of the variable that we already have in our program. So for example, we have name. Let's use John this time. Okay, and I can know what the value in the name is if I say print name, right? So but what if I want to get this value from not from inside the program but from outside the program, that is from the user? The function to use in this case is called input. Then we're going to assign the value in that input to a new variable. So let me say new name equals input. We're going to put a message here and say, what is your name? So you see what happens here is that the program tells me what is my name and expects an input. So I can say Joshua this time. Now we have a variable called a new name. If I now type print new name, it tells me Joshua. So this is basically one way to collect input from a user who is using your program, and it's a very handy one. If you maybe probably writing that, but we're still going to write more complex programs in the future, but it's necessary that you know that it's possible to get this. So if I probably want to add two numbers and I want to get these two numbers from the user, I can actually use this kind of function. So that would be all that I'm going to talk about this function, but I just wanted to know that we have this kind of function that does this, and we're going to use more of this in the future. And so just one thing I need to say about this is that every input that comes in from outside through this function is seen as a string. So if I say age equal to input, what is your age, and I say my age is 54, and I type and I give age, you can see here that age here is saying, you can see the quotes on the age showing that the type of age is actually string, even though we gave a number. So but this is just one thing to note with this function, input function. And in order to use this, we can actually convert it and say that, okay, we want to use this as a number or as an int or as a float. We can now say that, we want this to be int age, right? And now the answer is an integer. We can also say float, right? So this is basically a type conversion. from string to integer or from string to float. This is directly possible in Python. For some other programs, this takes more effort to do this, but in Python it's much more easier to convert from one basic type to another, and we can easily do the same thing from integer to string or float to string and vice versa. So it's necessary to note that whenever you receive input like this, you have to basically, if you're receiving a number, you have to convert it to the type that you want to use it, because the type comes in as a string. So next we're going to talk about iterables. So iterable is any object that can return its elements one at a time. The elements of an iterable can be retrieved using the addresses known as the index. So you might have heard of a list, tuples or something like that. So now we've been talking about like variables that hold one object. Iterables are more like variables that hold many objects at the same time. So I can say I can create a variable that holds the grades of students in a class. And how to do that, I designate by using this square bracket and say grades equal to 23 with a comma, 45 with a comma, 56 with a comma, 7 with a comma, 80 with a comma, 89 with a comma. I can keep going, but I'm just going to add one more. And you can see, so in this case we have created an iterable known as a list. It's a list because it has this square brackets on one side and the other. And if you look at the type, it tells you it's a list, right? Class list. So what is the significance of a list? A list is this kind of iterable that we can actually change, we can alter the content of the iterable, and as we said, it can give us its elements one at a time. So if I say I want the grade of the first student, I will say grades, and I want to say this here, that Python indexes from 0. So the first student, which is 23 here, the index of 23 here is 0. It's not 1. In other programs like MATLAB, I think it's 1, but in Python and some other C programs, this is an index of 0. So if we want the grade at index of 0, we just say grades 0. And the same thing goes for, say, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, grades 4. So because we can do this, then this iterable, and we've designated with a square bracket, is called a mutable, a mutable iterable. And the class of iterable that is non-mutable is known as a tuple. So we can also represent this same data structure, or this same group of data or of numbers in tuple. So the major difference between the designation in list and tuples is the way we define them. So it's the same thing: 45, 56, 7, 80, 89, and 80. Okay, so let's check the types. I will type of grades tuples. So you can see it shows here that is a tuple. Now we can also reference, we can also get the elements in grades tuple just like we got the elements in list. So tuples 0, you can see the same, it gives us the same answer. But to show you the difference between these two, these two iterables, between the tuple and the list, I'm going to try and change the value of one part in grades and do the same thing in grades tuple, and you will see what Python tells us. So if we have one element here that's kind of the same with another one, so we would like to change this to another number. So let's say grades 4, I think the index is 4, equals to, you can see, so this is how we change the element in that index, equals to, and we want to give it let's give it 92. This is totally possible. So if we print out, let's use print the values in grades here, we will see that that value has changed from 80 to 92. Now let's try the same thing. Grades tuples 4 92. You can see Python gives us an error and says that tuple object does not support item assignment, so we cannot change once we create the object. Once we create the values in the tuple, we cannot change the values in the tuple. So this is a major difference between the lists and the tuple. And so, I mean, depending on your function, depending on why you want to use the group of the iterables, these iterables, you might want to choose the list, or you might want to choose the tuple. But the list is usually used for a lot of problems, because it also involves, most of the programs also involve changing the number, changing the value of the elements at a particular index or the other. So this is just basic introduction to lists and tuple. There's still so much things that we can do with this kind of variable, with these types of variable, and we talked about that. We will talk about that in the future. Next, we will talk about strings as iterables. I know we've talked about strings before, like in the case of name. Oh, there is no, okay, here, and I think we have a variable called new name. Okay, so we can also see a name and strings here as an iterable. Remember the last time I said we can split the contents of a string. So if I want to, I can split the new name, or I can ask to give me from one point to another, like 2 to 5 maybe. You can see that. So because we can do this, we can also consider a string as an iterable, because we can actually reference, we can take out a certain part of the string, and just like in the tuple, we can do this for one part and the other. So I have to also say this also in case of tuples and lists. We can also do the same thing. So in case of grades, we can say grades 2 to 5. It gives us the grades between that this index and the other index, and the same thing for grades tuples 2 to 5. Same thing. And remember, we changed the value already. So if we think of this, then we can also say that a string, a bunch of literals like this, in this case, is also an iterable. And we will do some other things in the future that shows you that we can actually do the same operation on both the string as we do with the list and as we do with the grades tuple. And just one more thing, like in the case of name, the first element in name is J. So I'm just trying to relate the structure of this kind of variables that is in strings, in lists and tuple here, showing that they are kind of similar in the way that Python sees them. And we've been throwing around variable names a lot from the beginning of this program, of this videos. I've been using something like names, name, new name, grades, something like that. So how do I actually choose these names? Are there good names? Are there bad names? Are there names that the Python program would not accept? Yes, there are good names and there are bad names. So imagine if I want to choose a name as print, because Python already knows there is a function called print. So I cannot, it might be possible, but it's illegal to actually change the value of print into something else, because this is a keyword. This is an inbuilt keyword in Python, and there are so many other like inbuilt keywords in Python, and how to choose a name that is correct or that is legal in Python. So my one rule of thumb is just to choose a descriptive name of what you want to save in the object. So like in this case that I choose name or new name or grades tuple, it shows that, oh, this is, I want to store a name inside here, I want to store new name inside here, I want to store grades or grades tuple inside here. So as you go on, you would find out that which names or which variable names that are good and that are bad. But it's always very good to have descriptive names. So if I want to like save house numbers in the street, so I'll just say house numbers like that, and we would have the house numbers inside the list. And it's also, you can see here that it's possible to create an empty list. So in this case there is nothing inside house numbers. If I say print house numbers, it gives me back an empty list. And the same thing, you can have an empty tuple, like empty tuple, same thing. And we can have an empty string, empty string. So if I print empty, it shows me nothing. So basically we can see that these three variable types, we can think of them in kind of the same way, even though the operations we do with them later on are kind of different. But if you think of literals as things like this that we can assign, we can get the elements one after the other, and we can do this kind of operations, then it makes it very easy to remember. And so about variable names, I would advise you to check out the link in this video. I have also a material that goes along with this videos, where you can see most of the examples and the written parts of this video. And I also listed out the keywords that you cannot use as a variable name, like the keywords that Python has already defined as a inbuilt keywords, so you cannot use those as a variable name. But if you stay away from that, then every other variable name that you choose will be legal. Now the final thing we're going to talk about today is functions. So we've gone through a lot, and now we at a point where we want to make our program more useful. We've just been trying out a lot of things, and now we want to make our program useful and do things that are more useful in the real world. So function enables us to be able to do this. Now the time when we said print, the truth is we were actually calling a function that has been defined in Python. So we can also create our own function. In this case, since we have been working in the interactive environment from now, I would like to just shift a little and go back to the editor environment, because we're going to be writing several lines of code at a time, so it's a little difficult to do that here. So let me create a new and call this functions.py. And so we can create our first function. So a function is basically a group of code that you can reuse at any part of your code. So suppose I create a program that greets people when they log in into the program. I don't have to create a new I don't have to write a new line of code for each person that uses the program. I can write just one block of code and customize this block of code to give a customized output for each person that uses the program. So in this case, it's basically people say that if you have to write the same line of code many times, then you just have to make it into a function. So for example, we are doing an arithmetic operation in our program, and we want to get a square of a number. We don't have to calculate the square of the number each and every time when we have to do that. We can actually create a function that does that. Then we call this function, just like in the print case, just like in the, imagine if I have to write the codes for print every time I have to print something. It makes it very, very inefficient, right? So how do you make a function? The easy way, the way to do it in Python is to use the word def. And this is one of the words that you cannot use as a variable name in Python, also because it's already defined and designated in Python. So we say def. Our first function, let's call it a square of. Okay, so square of, we want to write a function that calculates the square of x, and we'll say result equals to x to raise to power 2. So this is how you do, like we mentioned in the arithmetic functions, this is how you do raise to power 2. And we would say the last thing we say is return result. And so we've written a function. This is just a very simple function. It takes the value, it takes x in this case, which is an input to the function, and gives an output, which is result. So this is very easy, and we can actually run this program like this. We can say Python functions. Well, nothing happens because we are not actually asking the program to print anything, so we cannot see any output. But if we want to use this function, we can say that print, or we can say y equal to square of. So we give our input here, so square of 5, right? And we can now print the value of y. This is a very simple program. You can see, so in any part of our program where we need to do a square of a number, we can easily just say I can do another one and say z equals to square of 100. Print z. Yeah, so using function saves us the time and the headache and the effort to rewrite the same line of code all the time. This is just one line of code anyway, but there are functions that has many lines of code that you don't want to repeat each time you want to do the same operation. So this is why functions are very very useful. And we can also have, in this case, function that has multiple inputs. So we define add. In this case, we can say add x and y. So in this case, we have two inputs. So as you guess, the result is going to be x plus y, and we're going to return the result. So if we say print, I think it's now necessary to write a message. So in this case, let's just skip that for now. Print, let's say sum equal to, say added equal to add 15 plus 45. Okay, and we'll print added. Oh yeah, this should be a comma. You can see this error here. Add missing one required positional argument. In the first place, I said 15 plus. Yeah, in my head I was doing that addition, but it needs two inputs. The program sees this as one input because I just said 15 plus 45. It will execute that 15 plus 45 as one input, but my function needs actually two inputs, so I have to use a comma there, and save that. Then I run it. Yeah, it does what it is. And so we can also have a function. So I write here function with multiple inputs. As a matter of fact, I'm not sure if I've said this before, but this is a comment, and a comment in Python basically is a line that the interpreter does not execute. So because if I have to put this, if I don't put this, then there's a problem with that line, and there's going to be an error. But I don't want the interpreter to execute that line, so I put this hash symbol in front of it, and so that is a comment line in Python. And we can also have a function with no return value. And this was I was talking about earlier, that you can have a function that maybe say greets people. So we're gonna say greet name in this case, and we're gonna print hello hello, and we're gonna put name here, and we're not going to return anything. Okay, and so to call this function, we say greet, we want to greet Joshua, and run this. You can see hello Joshua. And so this is kind of function, no return value. All of the other functions that we've written so far, we have a return result, but here there is no return value. Actually, there's a return value, but it's a value that we don't want to use because it's by default returns none, so which is another variable that means there's nothing in Python. It turns out that this variable is also very useful, but we're going to talk about that in the future. So this is a variable, this is a function that returns nothing. So we can actually customize each function depending on what we want the function to do for us. So I'm just going to edit one of the programs that I wrote earlier. Remember, I wrote this program that does hello world GUI. So I'm going to try and put this in a function, and so that I can I can supply the message. I can supply a new message all the time I want to run this GUI. So what I'm going to do here is just say def hello GUI. So I'm going to say message. So remember, if you look at it very well, each of the lines under the function is indented. This is very important in Python because this is how Python also knows that these lines of code are under this function. So we have to indent this block of line. We indent that. I highlight everything and press tab. That's what I did. And we don't have to actually return anything because we just want to show message. So what we'll do here is I'll replace this with message, right? And now we have a function that we can change the message all the time. So I can say that GUI message equal to this, or let me just say message 1 and message 2. Then I say, how are you doing? As a matter of fact, yeah, it's okay like that. Then I can call hello GUI on message 1 and do the same thing for message 2. You can see now we're reusing this block of code like 2 times right here. So let's run this program and see. Hello GUI. Yep. Thank you. See you in the next one. So if I close this and beyond, another GUI appears, and that comes to the end of this video. So you can see we've talked about iterables, and we also talked about functions, and we're gonna do a lot about functions in the future, but this is just like it's a very simplistic introduction, because the videos that will come after will actually be application of these ideas in real problems. So you can go ahead and try things on your own and see if you actually grasp the ideas in this video. And as always, if you have any issue, if you have any comments, please put them in the description below. And if you like this video, share it with other people and give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it, and it will help this channel to keep going. And until the next one, thank you. Have a good day.